Hello and welcome to Adobe Illustrator, and let's get started. So the first thing is go to Adobe Illustrator and find your icon and click on it. Wherever it exists on your computer, Macs, you should probably have it on your dock. Once it opens, it will prompt you immediately to start thinking about your document that you need. So I could create a new, or I can open a pre-existing document. But we're just going to go to New Document. So this is your New Document window. And what we have here are more options. So these are presets. And if you know what you're going to use this document for, it's great. You can just click on one of these presets and get started on your design. Knowing that this is not steadfast, you can always adjust and change the file once it's opened. But you got to open something first. So let's just go to Print. And you can see that the print now defines a little more curated look of presets. So we have just a few of the blanks, and then we have some templates that might get you going if you need to do a project. So we're going to start with letter. We're going to go over to the preset detail, and we're going to change our name first. And then there's width and height. So remember, this is showing the dimensions that we need to clarify for our document. So I'm going to change this just to inches, but pixel would have been okay. We want to be portrait or landscape, so let's keep it at portrait. We're going to do one artboard, and we're not going to worry about bleed. There are some other advanced options here that you might not have clicked downwards with the arrow. So click that down, and I just want to talk about color mode. So color mode for print, we're going to use CMYK. RGB is for screen only, and if you use these other devices and presets, it will automatically preset to the RGB for you. But just double check to make sure it's correct. We also want it at high res preview mode to be default. Don't worry about more settings, and you're ready to go. So let's just hit create. The first thing I want to talk about is your actual window. This window you can move around, you can change the size and scale. Kind of handy to be able to set your own window. So in here, it breaks down even further. So I'm going to grab this corner edge and pull it out. And right here, what I'm grabbing is your tool swatches, all this other information, which is your panels, is always located on your right. Again, you can manually move these around. I like to keep them locked in. I have multiple screens and I have lost tools before. So it's just easier to keep it all organized if it's in one. Keep in mind you can pull these down and pull these out so you can get a better description of the icons. Or if you're just trying to conserve space, minimize all of these into one long strip. This workspace right here is called your document window. Again, you can pull that out, pull that back in. This top panel here is really important. I really think that it's necessary to have it. If you're missing this bar, you can always go to Window and hit Control. This is what it looks like without it, so please make sure you go and you hit Control to click that open. This gives you access to some of the panel information very quickly depending on what tool you're using. So the menu bar on the top has more information and panels that is available for using this document. The window is very important because Window has access to defining and controlling the workspace more. Coming down the panel, I would like to hit Toolbars, and let's click on Basic. On the panel on the right side, pull this out because I really want to discuss what we should have on this side too. Properties is important. Swatches we would like to have. Color we'll talk about. Gradient we'll talk about. Color guide we probably won't get into. So I'm going to pull that off. Symbols we won't be able to get into. Layers, strokes, brushes. Artboards are important. Transparency we might cover a little bit. We'll take off appearance. We'll take off graphic styles, assets, and library. You can delete these other panels off your window. So here is kind of what I've constructed. And if you need more, you can always go to window and grab a few other. There are some other things that I use all the time, which is alignment. So once I do alignment, it will open up a few more things that come with alignment. So alignment and path is also something that I use. Pathfinder. So this is what you'll need. You can see up here that you can make your own preset. So I can go into new workspace after I've set this up, and I can create this to being graphic design 1. It's saying it already exists because it does, but you can create your own for this class. I'm going to click on graphic design, and you can see I basically have the same thing that I just talked about. Might be missing a few things. Oh, character I didn't have. So you want to go to window, and I think it'll be under type, and you want to make sure you have character open. Click on that, you'll be able to drag it open. Say the document window, I'm really talking about this white page. This white page is what is actually going to print. You can use the zoom tool, you can use Z to grab it, and you're going to get a plus. And this plus is going to increase the size, so I can get right to that corner. And then if I do option, I can also subtract it. So I can get it way far out there. I can also do that with the plus or minus on my keyboard. That's the shortcuts, plus and minus. But you have to do command, minus or plus to toggle back and forth. The other thing is important is the hand tool, which is H. And this allows you to move the panel around. So you might zoom out, but you might move it over here. You might want to move it over there. You might zoom it in, and you're losing that little area you wanted to get to, which is the center of your page. So let's start talking about some other tools. There are 3 arrow tools here that you'll be using. So direct tool and selection tool. You also have a grouping tool. And as you can see, the grouping tool also has different ways of selecting. So see how this is kind of grouped? All of these are a way of manipulating a whole bunch of different forms to move them around. So you're not creating new, you're just manipulating the forms that pre-exist. So the first thing we're going to talk about is shapes and colors. And here we define our color with a fill and a stroke. We also can define our color with a fill and a stroke up above. You know it's a fill because it's a square. And then this one's a square, but it's an outline of a square. So we have 2 ways of working with color. A color and swatches. Let's pull this right here. So swatches are already defined colors that are saved, and then the color is where you can create new ones. By using this bar, I can adjust and rotate colors. So it was on solid black, so it didn't make. I can also pick from the bottom. Once I picked, you can see that you also see it in the swatches, which then I can drag and put it into my swatch library. This swatch library is located up here in your control panel. So if I'm quickly working, I can use any of the colors I have pre-saved in my swatches. If I'm on the fly and I want to make a new color, I can quickly click on that. If my palette is open, it'll open up this, and I can quickly change my color, stroke or fill. Make sure that if you're doing a fill, that it's above, and if you're doing a stroke, it is above. Let's start making our shapes. We can go right here into our tool again, and we can click on the obvious rectangle tool. If I slowly click on it, I can open up all the other options. Let's just create a rectangle and an ellipse. Ellipse is our circle. So M for rectangle, L for ellipse. So I'm going to start with my M, hitting my keyboard M. And then I always have shift to make it a perfect square. If I don't want a perfect square, I can just click and drag, making more of a non-perfect rectangle. Again, let's change it to an L, which is going to be our circle. And if I do shift, I'm going to make that perfect circle. And you can see with the WH, height and width, it is a perfect amount. It's symmetric. Now, if I just drag, I can drag this out and we get a different weight, a different length and height. All right, so because I have these colors filled, we are getting a stroke and a fill on them. Remember, all I need to do is go up here and I can change the fill to anything I want. If I'm going to select a different shape, I need to use, yes, the selection tool. So if I'm going to move around and change these selections, I need to use the selection tool again. We'll be referring to this a lot. So I select it, I can come back up and I can change the colors here. So I still want to play around with the stroke. I like the stroke, but it's a little hard to see. It might be better with a different color. Or the other thing that you can do with stroke is that you can change the size and scale. So I'm going to do a different color, but I'm also going to change the size and scale. I don't always need to have a color and a stroke on at the same time. Remember, you can always delete them. Just make sure the one you want to change is the one in front, or you're on the right panel. So what I want you to do is you make sure that you're on selection, which is V, select it, and then hit Option on your keyboard, and you'll see that there's two arrows that double up because that's what you're going to do. We're going to duplicate these four objects by holding on to the option and dragging down. It's nice that we have these handy guides. I hope you guys have been noticing them. They're either going to show you where it's equally spaced or if you're in a centered. So a few more tools I want to show you really quickly is if you select all of them, you can use up here on the toolbar. This is your alignment and it'll allow you to align the tools. I love using the alignment. If you don't see it up here, you can always find it because it was one of the tools I asked you to hold on to. The other thing that alignment does that's great is it will make these spaces in between centered. So there's a nice way of making everything justified and equal when you're using them. So be careful because you can actually select too many of things and align them up the wrong way. You can always undo everything, right? Alignment undo, or you can just do Command Z and it'll take you right back to where we want to be. So we just talked a little bit about how to use alignment. So we're going to select some of these and we're going to combine them. So I'm going to take these two and I'm going to move them so they're overlapping each other. And then I can select it. I combine things by using the Pathfinder. And there's different modes of shaping. The first one is to combine it as one piece. That's one way. I'm going to do Command Z to undo it. And this one, you can see that the white is overlapping a solid. So here is our white one and here is our solid. It's going to cut away. So this is cutting away. That clear portion is cutting away. This one, the outside will cut away, leaving the two that are connected, overlapping, will be left. So if I click on this, it'll be that center part that is still there. I'm going to undo both actions so we can place some more. So this is going to take away the center part that's connected, the overlapping part, and keep the rest. So those are the ways of manipulating the shape and combining. So I have all of these kind of connecting to each other. And let's see what it does when I select them all. Still using the selection tool. I'm going to make them a little bit larger in my space. And then I'm going to use the Pathfinder to divide them all. So what it's done, it's divided each one of these in its own form. You can play around with the rest, but those are the 5 that I frequently use. The divide and then the 4 modes up above. So you can't really get access because right now there's still one shape. But if I go up to Object, I can group and ungroup. So right now, this is when I use the divide, it made it into a group, which means it's all connected. But I can go up and ungroup. And when I ungroup, now they're all separate. Each one of these has become their own shape where they overlapped. So this is starting to create like almost a unique little interesting pattern. And we are going to get into patterns, so this might be a fun process for you to think about. So I can select the whole area and see if I have like missing shapes with no color, or if there's anything I can't see, something that's hidden. So we did talk about this briefly. The magic tool, if I select this green, it'll select all the green. It's magically picking up one object that's the same throughout all the shapes. Again, this is just selecting. The lasso, you get to kind of go in between things and select objects. So this is where you get into like really detailed stuff and you need to get in and just get one shape out. That won't work when you have the big square, right? I wouldn't be able to get this shape out unless I used the lasso. And last thing is, if it's grouped, I can still use the group plus selection, the arrow with the plus, even if it is grouped, and move objects. But when I'm on the solid arrow, the select arrow, I can't move individual pieces out of a group. All right, so I'm going to talk about just a couple more tools. So the segment line is that backslash. It's a very simple tool. There's some other tools that you can play around underneath it, but basically it is just a line. If you want a straight line, you have to hit Shift. So right now you can see I have no colors selected, so let's select some colors. I'll use my selection tool to select them both, and then I'm only going to want to use stroke. Because these are basically strokes, they're not a shape and they can't become shapes, they're just line segments, we're going to only fill them as strokes, not shapes. And we're going to talk about strokes. So this was in the panel over here. It's one of the things I wanted to talk about. Much like what you can do over here, this has a couple other things that I'd like to show you. It can do caps, so it can make the stroke more circular. And it can also, remember, I can select them all and then do Option, get the 2 arrows and make copies. I can also do dashes. Then you can kind of play around with making dashes. There might be more options here. You can change them to have arrowheads. And you might want it to be a fun arrowhead. So there's some options here that you might want to try to play around with in stroke. The other thing in stroke, using just the segment simple form, is that you can change it and make it into different shapes. So again, I'm just doing Option and dragging a new one. So Option, drag, and I can drag another one to go through all these different shapes. Sure, Option drag. And the fun thing on top of that, there's the one right next to it, which allows you to play with has a little bit more artsy to it. So this fan brush and some filtered distressed painting. And there's some more in this library if you wanted to play around with it. So that is strokes. So the first thing is, let's grab the rectangle. Make sure you've chosen a color that's like a light blue. And let's click and drag using the shift. A nice square. And let's do one more. And then on the bottom, let's not hold the shift. Let's just drag a rectangle in. So we're going to look at these three tools here. We're going to start with the eraser. So I'm going to take the eraser tool, and you can actually see the circle around the X. I can manipulate that using the left and right brackets. Right will make it bigger, left will make it smaller. So I'm going to make this pretty big. It's the start, I think, of the wave, kind of going in the background. And then I'm going to progressively go smaller. Hopefully this is a little meditative. You know, we're almost done. We watched the whole video. And also add little bits inside instead of cutting all the way through that you probably can't do with the other cutting devices. So I can add like little bubbles to it if I wanted to. And so on. So that's how you use the eraser. So let's move on to the scissors. So the scissors, before we move on, I'm going to change the square into not a fill, but a stroke, and I'm going to add some weight to the stroke. And for the scissors really affect the edge, which is the stroke or path. You can see when I hit this intersection, I'm hitting the path. So I'm selecting there and another portion of the path, and that will cut and free the box of an opening. For the knife, it's a little more rugged. I can just literally cut through. And there are your three different ways of cutting into a shape in Illustrator. All right, the next thing that I'd like to do is one of my favorite things, which is thinking about type. And we're gonna go to the T in the toolbox, which is also T as a key command, and we're gonna drag a box open. And then you're going to release it, and you're going to find that a type will flow in. Don't worry about that. You can select that random type and delete it. Let's just have a blank type box. I want you to make sure you pulled out your character box and make sure you have that available. And we're also going to be using the control up on the top, or at least I'll be pointing that out. And the first thing we're going to write is how to cut. I had my capital on a little bit too much, so let's... All right, so choose Helvetica, go to the character, and it's the first one. We'll give you a whole bunch of lists of different typefaces that you can use. Find Helvetica or another sans serif to use. And then I want the first one to be you to find in the styles is regular. So this is where the style is, set the style, and then styles up here, and also you have your font list available here. So if you didn't have this out, you could just come up here and use it. Again, you can use this style too. So choose the different styles. And then the other one is oblique, which is italic, and then bold we already started with. So regular is just, regular type. And then oblique, it kind of has a different voice, a different action to it. A lot of times it calls out important books or titles. And so does bold. Bold is kind of like a display where they really want you to know what's going on. It's very important. So after that, let's grab this box using V, the selective tool, and Shift, and create another one. And I like us to find another typeface. So let's find a serif font. Let's find Georgia might be something you can use. I feel like Georgia is also available on PCs. So you have two different styles of actual font faces, a serif and sans serif. And then what we want to do is we kind of did the same thing. This will be regular, this will be italic, and the last one will be bold. So this is how you scale your type up, and this is how you think about the space in between. So this is your size of your font, and this is your leading, the space in between. So if you're missing type or it's not showing up, it might be because the size of your font or the leading might kick it out. So make sure that that's showing up. The other thing I want to talk about is your type box. You might think, just like the shapes, that you can change and manipulate them. Well, you can, but the type kind of acts weird. It kind of doesn't follow the box exactly. You can also cut it into it, but you're losing the type, and this red form shows up, this little square, that indicates that you have type in the type box, but you can't see it because you have to pull the type out. If you do want to manipulate the type box with the type in it, the best way to do it is using the transfer tool. And that's Command E. And when you do that, not only can you rotate it, maybe turn it upside down, I can hit Shift to make sure it lines up correctly, but I can also scale it. That kind of indicates that this is a little bit different than your regular shapes. So if I do that drag and bring down again, I want to show, let's grab both of these so we can get a little space, Command E, and make it a little smaller. I want to show that how they are different. So if I want to create these into shapes so I can be more playful, I can cut, I can use the eraser on it. What I can do is I can go to type up in the menu and scroll down to use create outline, which is also Shift Command 0. This outlines the type, which allows you to now manipulate the type. I can now go back to what we just learned, and I can actually erase the type. Unlike when it's actually a typeface, I cannot. You can just see that it won't let me do it. And also you can go and get your group selection and you can move the type around. Once it's been changed into an outline, you can really manipulate and change it around. So I'm going to go back to this one. I'm going to rotate it, and I want to show you that you can change the color of these. So if I select them, I can still use my fill to change the different colors. Even though they're a font, I can do that, and I can also add strokes. So you can manipulate it when it's still a font into the different strokes and fill. And the nice thing about when it is still a font, I can immediately change it into different fonts. So it's very quickly editable, where once it is a shape, you can no longer change the font into another font. All right, so that's kind of a wrap for fonts. I hope you can have some time to kind of play around with that and get used to some of the software. Thank you for sticking with me, and have a good day.